Hello and welcome to SQL Server Integration Services, also referred to as SSIS. SQL Server Integration Services is a product developed by Microsoft. It is a platform for building enterprise-level data integration and data transformation solutions. With SQL Server Integration Services, you can help solve complex business problems by copying or downloading the files, sending email messages in response to events. It can also be used in updating data warehouses, cleaning and mining data, and also managing SQL Server objects and data. SQL Server Integration Services, the packages they create, so they can work alone or they can work in connection with other packages to address complex business problems or requirements. SQL Server Integration Services can extract and transform data from a wide variety of sources, such as XML data files, flat files, and also relational data sources. And then they can then load that data they've collected into one or more destinations. Also, SQL Server Integration Services includes rich set of built-in task and transformation tools that they use for constructing packages and integration services, which is used for running and managing packages. The integration services also comes with a graphical integration tool, which you can use to create solutions without writing a single line of code. If you prefer to write code, you are welcome to do that. SQL Server Integration Services gives you the environment to do that. But the graphical integration tool can also help if you're not inclined or you don't want to write much code. To have SQL Server Integration Services installed, you need to do that via the SQL Server Data Tools. So once you have SQL Server Data Tools installed, it will install the business intelligence templates inside Visual Studio. That is where you will access the SQL Server Integration Services from. So that's it for this lecture. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. Hello there, welcome to this video. What is ETL? The E in ETL stands for extract, the T in ETL stands for transform, and the L in ETL stands for load. So ETL is basically a process. It is a data pipeline used to collect data from various sources, then transforms the data according to business rules, and then loads the data into a destination data store or warehouse. You can extract data from homogeneous or heterogeneous data sources. That means you can extract the data from one source or from several sources. You can then transform the data for storing in a proper format, because when you extract data from different sources, they may be in different formats. So you can then use the transform process to transform the data into a proper format according to your business requirements. And then you can use the load process to load the transformed data into its final destination or target, which could be a data warehouse or data store. So let's take a look at a brief illustration of how the ETL process works. So you start with data source. So you need to identify where you are going to extract your data from. So you can extract data from different sources. For example, you can extract data from a Microsoft SQL server. You can extract data from an Oracle database and also from a flat file. Now, once you've extracted the data, you also need to put it in a staging area. So the staging area is going to be the holding place for the extracted data from different sources. And once you have then extracted the data from different sources, it goes into the staging area. And the next phase is going to be the transformation. So this is where you transform the data from various sources. The transformation process basically takes place in a specialized engine, and also often will involve using staging tables, which will be used to temporarily hold data as it is being transformed from the source to the destination. So once the data has been transformed, you can hold it in a repository. From that repository, you can then load the transformed data into your data store or data warehouse. And this could include several database systems you want to load the data into. So this is just a basic illustration of how the ETL process works. The data transformation that takes place usually involves various operations, which could include filtering the data, sorting the data, aggregating the data, even joining the data. It also can clean the data and deduplicate the data and also validate the data. So these are the various transformation processes that you can take when you are deploying or employing an ETL process. You can also often run these three ETL phases. You can make them run in parallel to each other to save time. For example, while the data is being extracted, a transformation process could be working on the data that has already been received and prepare that data for loading. Also, a loading process can begin working on the data it has received rather than waiting for the entire extraction process to complete. So you can have these three phases, the extract, transform, and load, work in parallel to each other to save time. A common problem that a lot of organizations face is how to gather data from multiple sources in multiple formats and then move it to one or more data store. The destination may not be the same type of data store as the source data, and often the format is different, or the data needs to be cleansed or shaped in such a way before it gets loaded into its final destination. And there are various tools and services that can be used for this process. If you're dealing with Microsoft SQL Server, you can use the SQL Server integration services to implement an ETL process. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to create a new integration services project. I've got Visual Studio opened. I'm going to click on the link to create a new project. Visual Studio has a variety of templates that you can use to create new projects depending on the type of project you want to create. If you've recently used a template, they will be listed on the left hand side here on the recent project templates. You can also search for templates based on the type of project you want to create. In the search bar, I typed in integration and a list of templates that matches the search criteria has been displayed. So I'm going to click on the first one, which is the Integration Services Project. So I make sure that's highlighted, and then I'll click on the next button. On the Configure Your New Project page, you have a default name for the project. I've replaced the default project name. I've called it SSIS for Beginners. This is the location where the project is going to be stored. I'm going to click on the Create button on the bottom right hand corner here. When you create a new Integration Services project, by default, an empty package, which is called package.dtsx, is created and added to your project. I'm going to rename the default package, so I'll right click on it, and there is an option to rename, so I click on the rename option. I have renamed the default package to my package 1. I've given it a number 1 just in case I create multiple packages. In this video, I created a new Integration Services project. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. What is SSIS Designer? The SSIS Designer is a graphical tool that you can use to create and manage integration services packages. The designer is available in SQL Server Data Tools as part of an integration services project. You can use SSIS Designer to perform a variety of tasks, such as constructing the control flow in a package, constructing the data flows in a package, adding event handlers to the package and package objects for viewing the package content. Also at runtime, you can view the execution progress of a package. You can undo and redo up to 20 actions in SSIS Designer. Let's take a look at the parts of the SSIS Designer. When you create a new integration services project, it generates an empty package, and this is the interface for the package in the design view, which is the SSIS Designer. The SSIS Designer has 5 permanent tabs, 1 each for building the package control flow, which is this one here, and 1 for the data flow. We've got 1 for the parameters, the event handlers, and the package explorers. These 5 permanent tabs are what you will always see when you generate a new integration services project. So this is the SSIS Designer view. In this video, I gave you a quick introduction to SSIS Designer. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to learn how to add and configure a flat file connection manager. What is a flat file? A flat file basically is a file containing records that have no structured interrelationship. Unlike a relational database format where there is some kind of relationship between one table or another. For this lecture, I have provided a sample flat file that we are going to work with. So please download it so that you can follow along with the lectures. In our previous lecture, we created a package, an empty package. So what we will do in this lecture, we are going to add a flat file connection manager to this package. Okay, and the flat file connection manager basically is going to enable us, it will enable us to extract, okay, data from a flat file. So it will enable the package, this package here, to extract data from a flat file format. So let's create a flat file connection manager. So to do that, from the Solution Explorer, you right click anywhere on the connection manager here, just right click and click on New Connection Manager. It'll give you an option to scroll down and select Flat File Connection Manager and click OK, click Add. We'll give it a few minutes and you are given this dialog box to populate. So we need to first of all change the name here where it says Connection Manager name. We need to change the default name. So you can just change the name. I'm going to call mine Sample Flat File Source Data. And in this option here that says select a file and specify the path, we're going to click on Browse and we're going to pick up the sample file that we're going to use, the sample flat file. This file is available to download. If you look at the resource section for this lecture, it is available for download. So if you could download it from there. So I'm going to browse to it. I click on Browse and I've got it saved in my documents folder. That's it there. So it should be called sample currency data.txt. So click to open. So let's change some settings here. Under local, make sure you specify whatever country you're in. This code page here, you can leave that set to Latin, but change your default wherever you are in the world. Just change that. I'm in the UK, so I've got UK, United Kingdom selected. We are also going to rename the columns here. So click on this columns tab and we are going to change some of the column names. All right, sorry, click on this tab here that says Advanced. Let's pop over there first. Click on Advanced. So this is where we're going to make some changes. By default, there are 4 columns. So all the columns 1, 2, 3, 4, they are all initially set to have this string data type with an output column width of 50. All right, let's change the names of these columns to make them more descriptive. So we'll start with the first column here. The name here, default name, is just column 1. So we're going to change that to average rate. Make sure there are no spaces between the words in the name. So I'll pop over to column number 2. I'm going to change that from USD to currency ID. Okay, go on to the next one. I'm going to change this to currency date. All right, one more, and in the final column, I'm going to change this to end of day rate. End of day rate. So notice the capitalization of the first letter of each of the words. So once that's done, just click OK. So that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, we added a flat file connection manager and also renamed the columns in the sample flat file. Thanks so much for watching. Bye. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to remap the column data types. We've already got our flat file as the source data. So where we are going to extract that data to is going to be the destination column, which is going to be inside our AdventureWorks DW database. We're going to use some columns from that database. We need to make sure that the data types match. For example, if you've got a string data type from the source data, we want the destination column also to have a string data type. If not, the extraction will fail or there'll be complications because the data types are different. So we need to remap it to make sure they match. So inside the Solution Explorer, right-click on the sample flat file source data, which is your connection manager. Right-click on that and click Open. So I'm going to open up this dialog box here. And basically, what happens once the integration services also has tools within it to help you suggest the most appropriate data types based on the first 200 rows of data. However, you can change this later. You can change whatever suggestion they have given you can change that. So click on this advanced option here, and this tab here called Suggest Types. This is what I was talking about. If we click on that, it will suggest data type based on the first 200 rows. So we've got this column selected, so it will give us a suggestion for data type for this column based on the first 200 rows of data. So click on Suggested Types and it will tell you number of rows 200, suggest the smallest integer type. So if you click OK, it will go ahead and suggest a data type. So we're not going to make any changes. I'm just going to click on the OK for it to give us a suggested data type based on the first 200 rows. No, currently the data type here is showing as string. All right, so I'm just going to click OK to that. You notice here it has changed the data type. It is suggested that the data type should be float based on the first 200 rows or records in that column. Now, what I want to do, I want to go over to the database, the DW AdventureWorks database, to compare it to the destination column we are hoping to send this data to. So let's go to All Programs, SQL Server, and click on SQL Server Management Studio. We're going to click on that to connect to SQL Server Management Studio, and just click Connect to connect. We click on the database plus sign here. We click on the AdventureWorks plus sign. The column we've just changed, this one here, the average rate. All right, inside the AdventureWorks database, the destination for that will be let's click on tables. There's a table called Fact Currency Average. I'm going to look for Fact Currency Average. Fact Currency. There's a Fact Currency here. So the corresponding column we want to match that to is this one here that says Fact Currency. So if we expand that column, inside that table, this Fact Currency Rate table, we've got several columns. And the column we are trying to match it to is this one here, average rate. If you notice, the data type here is float, And if I go back to this connection manager, it can tell you that the integration services has suggested a float. So that matches the destination data type. So let's go on to the next column, which is the currency ID column. We click on this suggest type again. Currently it's showing as string. So we click on suggest, and based on the first 200 rows, integration services will suggest a data type. So I'll click OK. And currency ID here is come back saying the data type is string based on the data from the first 200 rows. Now the corresponding column in our AdventureWorks database will be a table called dim currency. So let's go over to AdventureWorks and look for a table called dim currency. So most of the AdventureWorks table. So we've got dim currency table. So we expand that table, expand the column. And the column we are interested in is this alternate key one here. If I scroll down, you can see the data type is nchar3. nchar. Okay, so the data type is different. So we need to change the data type from the source so that it can accommodate it can match, or it will fit in to the destination column data type. All right, so the currency ID, although integration services have suggested a string based on the data from the rows, however, the column data type is incompatible to the destination. So we're going to have to manually change that. So we're going to make some changes here. So we're going to change this to a database string type. So we're just going to change where it's got DT underscore TR, STR. We're just going to add a W in front of that. So it'll now be okay. So you place a W in front of that. So the new data type will now be DT underscore WSTR. The only thing that's changed here, we've added a W in front of the STR so that the data type can match the one for the destination when the data extraction or conversion takes place. So what we're going to do, we're going to also make it a Unicode data type. So we're going to select this option here, Unicode. So it should now say Unicode string data type. That will make it possible for it to match the destination column. The next option will be the currency date. So let's go to the currency date here. Again, let's go to suggested types and see what integration services suggest. They have suggested a string data type. So let's go over to the database, AdventureWorks, and check for the corresponding table here. The table we are looking for here is a dim date table, which is this one here. So we expand that and go into the columns. We'll be looking at the alternate key, full date alternate key, this one here. And if we scroll down, the data type is date. All right, so we need to make that compatible to the source. So we need to change that in the property pane here. We need to come here and change this to, I'm going to change it from this here to database date. All right, so let's see if there's any option for it here. No option, so we're going to manually do that. So we're going to change that. So what we're going to do is change the data type. We'll click on the drop down menu here. There is, and look for, we're going to use the database date time. So click on that. So we'll change that to database date time. We've got one more column to change, which is this one here, end of day rate. Let's click on suggest types, see what it suggests. It suggested a float data type. Let's have a look at the destination column, and the table we are hoping to target here is the fact currency. There's a table called fact currency end of date, fact currency. So the table is called fact currency rate. So we expand the table, look at the columns, and the column we are looking at here is this one, end of day rate. So the data type is float. So if we go back to our integration tool, that matches the data type that integration services have suggested for us. So we don't need to change anything here. So we just click OK. So we have successfully remapped our data type from our source flat file to match our destination columns. Thank you for watching. Apologies, this lecture is taking quite long. I hope it's not been too boring for you. Thank you. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add and configure an OLE DB connection manager. We have already added a flat file connection manager to connect to the data source. The OLDB connection manager will enable us to connect to the destination. So within your SQL Server integration services, within this tool here, let's head over to the Solution Explorer. Right click on the connection manager, the one that's highlighted, and click New Connection Manager, and browse through the various connection manager types until you see the one we're looking for. That's the one we're looking for, connection manager for OLEDB connection. Click Add, and you have this configuration box. Click New. We need to specify the name of the server for the destination. This will be the name of your SQL server. So I'm just going to open up my SQL server. This is my SQL server name. It's called BlueLime/SQL Express. So I'm going to type that in to this box. I'll type in BlueLime/SQL Express. So this will be the name of my server. Make sure you've got Windows authentication selected. Here you need to specify a database name. So again, I'll go over to my SQL server. The database I want here is the AdventureWorks DW 2014. So I need to type that in here. So I've typed in the name of my database, which is AdventureWorks DW. I mistyped the DW, AdventureWorks DW 2014. So I need to test the connection. Always a good idea to test your connection to make sure you can connect. So I'll click test connection. Say test connection succeeded. So I'm able to communicate with that server. So click OK and OK again. So we have successfully made a connection to our destination columns. So we now have two connection managers. This one here is to our AdventureWorks database, which is the database for our destination, and this one here is the source data. So this is the flat file data connection, the flat file manager connection. So we've got our connection managers set up. So that's it for this lecture. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add a data flow task to the package. We've already created the two connection managers, one for the source data and the other for the destination data. So we are going to add a data flow task. Basically what it is, the data flow task will encapsulate the data flow engine that moves data between the source and the destination. All right. It will also provide the functionality for the transforming, the cleaning, and the modification of the data that has been moved or is being moved. So it will encapsulate all that and do it behind the scene. The data flow task is basically where most of the work for an extract, transform, or load process occurs, also referred to as ETL. So most of the ETL process occurs within the data flow task. So let's go ahead and add one. Note that the SQL Server Integration Services actually separates the data flow from the control flow. So that's the control flow and that's the data flow. So to add a data flow, click on, make sure you've got the control flow selected and not the data flow. So click on the control flow and go to the toolbar, the SSIS, which is SQL Server Integration Services Toolbox, which is this one I've got here. If you haven't got that listed, you could go to the View tab and just select it from the list of toolbars. Okay, there's a list of toolbars, so you can select it from there. Sorry, it's not available within the view. So if you haven't got the SQL Server Integration Services Toolbox, which is the SSIS, I've got it already listed. If you haven't got it showing there, click on this SSIS tab and then click on the SSIS Toolbox. All right, so I've got it here, so I'm just going to click on that. Make sure you've got this option, the favorites option. Make sure you've got that selected, and where you've got the data flow, just going to drag that and drop it on the inside this window here. All right, so this window now is the is under the control flow. So this here is the design surface of the control flow. Okay, we are going to rename this data flow task that we've just added on. So right click on it and select rename. And we're going to call it extract sample currency data. So I'm going to change it from that to extract sample currency data. So I've renamed it. It is actually a good practice to provide unique names to all the components that you add to a design surface. And the names should be descriptive of the function that each component performs. Right click on this task here and go properties. And we're going to check the local ID here. Make sure that your local ID property name is set to the wherever you are. I'm in the United Kingdom, so I've got it set to English and United Kingdom. So make sure that is set to reflect where you are. So that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, we successfully added a data flow task. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add and configure a flat file source. Basically, a flat file source is a data flow component that uses metadata that is defined by a flat file connection manager. So it uses that to specify the format and the structure of the data to be extracted from the flat file by a transformation process or transform process. So in this lecture, we are going to configure the flat file source component to use the sample flat file source data connection manager that we've already created. So to add a flat file source component, we need to click on the data flow tab here. Just click on data flow and you should see the extract sample currency data. And next thing we need to do is open up our SSIS toolbox, which is this here. If you can't see it here, click on the SSIS tool and then sorry, let me hide that for a minute. You click on the SSIS tool and then click on SSIS toolbox. Okay, so click on the toolbox, click on this tab that says other sources. Click on that. And here we've got a flat file source component. So we're going to just drag that onto the data flow design surface. All right, so we've now got a flat file data source. We're going to change the name. So we right click on it and click rename. And we're going to change the name from flat file source to extract sample currency data. So type in extract sample currency data. Okay, so that will be the new name. The red cross here is saying that a connection manager has not been assigned yet to this. So we'll do that shortly. All right, so please double click on this file source, double click on it, and that will give us this flat file source editor. So in the flat file connection manager, make sure you've got the sample flat file source data selected. Make sure you've got that selected. Click on columns just to check that all the columns are correct. They appear to be. Click OK. You notice the red cross has disappeared. Right click on this source here and click properties, and in the property make sure that the local ID here, make sure that local ID property is set to wherever you are. I'm in the United Kingdom, so mine is set to United Kingdom. All right, so that is it for this lecture. In this lecture, we successfully added a flat file source component and we hooked it up to our sample flat file connection manager. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add and configure Lookup Transformation. A lookup transformation basically is used to perform a lookup by joining data in the specified input column to a column in a reference data set. For this lecture, we are going to set up a lookup transformation that will use the OLEDB connection manager that we've already created. We're going to use that to connect to the database that contains the data that is the source of the reference data set. In this lecture, we are going to configure two lookup transformation components to add to the package. One transformation will be to perform a lookup of the values from the currency key column of the DIM currency dimension table, which belongs to the AdventureWorks 2014 DW. Okay, so we're going to do that, and we're going to do that based on a matching currency ID column value from our source, which is a flat file, which is a sample currency data file, text file from the flat file source. So we're going to do the transformation based on that. The second lookup will be a transformation that will perform a lookup of the values from the date key column of the DIM date dimension table from the AdventureWorks DW database. We're going to base that to match the currency date column value from the flat file sample data source. So to add and configure lookup key transformations, we click on our tool again, the SSIS tool, and within the tool there is an option for this common. Let's click on common here, and within this option here there should be an option for lookup. All right, so we've got an option there, so we're going to drag this lookup onto the design. So make sure the lookup is directly below the extract sample currency data tags. Make sure it's directly below that. First, we need to rename this lookup component. So right click on it and click on the properties. No, sorry, not properties. Let me escape that. Right click and go rename. That's it. So we're going to rename that. I'm going to call it lookup currency key. Oh, I should have left that lookup. So we're going to type lookup currency key. All right, so that would be the new name. And then click on this extract sample currency data source here and drag the blue arrow so that it connects to this lookup currency key. So just drag it down into it. Okay, so now it should connect. So we've connected that to this. So both components are now connected. Double click on this lookup currency key. We want to change some properties here. Make sure you've got the full cache selected under the general tab, and then in the connection type area here, connection type, make sure you've got the OLEDB connection manager selected, and then click on the connection page. On the connection page, make sure you've got in the OLEDB connection tab, make sure you've got the database selected. So this is my database. Make sure you've got the AdventureWorks selected. Next, make sure you've got the use results of an SQL query selected. So check on that. And inside here, you can either build a query or insert a query. So I've already pre-written the query. The query is available for you to download and use. So if you look on the resource tab for this lecture, there will be a file called sqlquery.txt. So that's where I'm pasting this query from. So this is the query here. Basically, I'm selecting using a select statement from this table here, dim.currency. I'm setting that as a ref table. This is an alias I've set for it. And these are the various currencies I have set for it. So just copy and paste that query into this query window. Next, let's click on the columns tab. On the columns tab, just make sure that the following selections are available. You've got in the available input column, make sure you've got. So what we're going to do, we're going to make some changes here. So we're going to drag this currency ID, drag it from the available input column, and we're going to drop it here next to the currency alternate key. Okay, let's see what's going on. Saying the data type do not match. Let's have a look. So trying to drag this input, this currency ID from the available input into the available lookup, we're getting some errors here that the data type do not match. So what we need to do, we need to go back, need to exit that for a minute and go back into our connection manager for the source. So right click on that and click open, and let's go to the advanced and look at the currency ID. We've got string, so we need to change that. It looks like it wasn't saved when we made these changes. So click on the drop down arrow. We need to select a Unicode. We need to select this option here. Select that, click OK, and let's go back here and go into general. Make sure that it's full cache. Make sure you've got that. Let's come back to connection. Make sure you've got that. Make sure you've got this selected. This wasn't saved because I cancelled out of it. So I have to paste the data, the script back in. This script is available for you to download for this lecture if you look under the resource tab. All right, so now let's go back to the columns. Now that I've adjusted that data type, hopefully it should work now. Let's drag this currency ID. What's actually happening here, this is a transformation stage. This is a lookup transformation. So this transformation enables the performance of equijoins. So there's going to be some equijoins between the input and a reference data set. So we need at least one column in this available input column table that must be mapped to one column here, and they must have the same data type. So let's drag that currency ID panel into this currency alternate. It's still not happy, so we need to check that. What we need to do is right click on this one here, this extract sample currency. Let's look at the properties and click on show advanced editor. So what you need to do, click on the input output properties and click on this plus sign. You need to make sure that the data type, if I click currency ID, make sure it's got Unicode string there. And then if we go back and click on the output columns and click on currency ID, make sure the data type there is, I've just changed this, that's why, but it wasn't the same. That's why we were getting an error. So make sure the data type there matches. Okay, and just click OK. So now if we double click on that and go back to the connection tab, I need to paste the SQL query in again and click on columns. Now if I drag this ID column here to the alternate, it should work. You can see the connection has been made. Make sure you check the box next to the currency alternate key. Next, click on this OK button there. All right, you can see the red cross has been removed. There was a red cross there before. So now we know that this extraction type data, the source has been linked to the lookup. Next, we want to check the properties. So right click on the lookup currency key and go properties, and make sure on the local ID there you've got wherever you are selected. I'm in the United Kingdom, so I've got United Kingdom selected. And make sure the default page code, if I scroll down, there should be a property. That's the default page code. Make sure that is set to 1252. All right, we're gonna I apologize, this lecture's gone on a bit long due to some technical issues that I experienced during the lookup setup. So we're gonna split this lecture into two. In the second part, we're gonna create a lookup for the other column, which is the date column. So we'll perform the lookup for the date key transformation in the next lecture. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to continue from our previous lecture where we added and configured a lookup table for the currency ID. Now we're going to add and configure lookup table for the date key transformation. So the process is going to be slightly identical to the lookup transformation for the currency key. So what we did for the currency key, we're going to do the same for the date key transformation. So let's open up our SSIS toolbox and just drag another lookup component. We'll make sure it's underneath the previous lookup. So let's try and connect both lookup together. To do that, click on the lookup currency key and just drag the blue arrow until it gets there. So when you do that, you get this dialog box come up. So in the input here, in the input selection dialog box, make sure you've got lookup match output. So if not, you select that. Sorry, I've missed out it's this one you need to select. Sorry, ignore what should be here. This one should already be populated, this input tab here. So make sure you've got lookup input there. In the output, we need to click on the drop down and we need to select lookup match output. We need to make sure that is selected, and then we'll click on the OK button. Sorry for the confusion. Click OK. So let's rename this lookup, the one we've just added, this one here. Right click and click on rename. We're going to rename this to lookup date key. So I'm just going to put space there and type in date space key. Okay, so that will be the new name for that. Next thing, let's double look on this lookup date key, and we have the lookup transformation editor. So let's change some of the properties. In the general tab, we are going to change from full cache to partial cache. Make sure you've got the partial cache selected. And in the connection tab here, we're going to make some changes. So in this, make sure you've got the relevant database selected, AdventureWorks DW. Make sure you've got that displayed. And in the use table or view box, so in this use table or view box, click on the drop down arrow and look for dbo.dimdate. So that's what we want. Make sure you've got dbo.dimdate selected. And next, on the columns page, click on the columns page. On the columns page, we are going to make the following selections. In this available input column panel, we're going to drag the currency date panel. We're going to drag that to the available lookup column, which is this. I'm going to drop it where it's got the full date alternate key. We're going to drop that here. All right, so we're going to pick this currency date, drag it along and drop it here. Okay, so the data type do not match. So what we're going to do, we are going to make some checks. So what we'll do, we'll go back to our flat file data source. We click cancel out of that for now. We'll come back to that. So we'll right click on our flat file, click. No, actually, let's go a shorter way. There's a shorter way we can do that. So right click on this extract currency data, right click on that and go show advanced editor and click input output properties and click on the plus, select external columns. Let's check that first. And on that currency date, let's look at the data type. Data type is called string dt_str. So the data type appears to be wrong. So we need to change that. So click on that. It should be, we should change it to dt database. So let's look for dt. It should be this. Database date should be dt_db date. Now make sure you've got that selected. All right, and then we go back and click on that again. This time we'll look in the output file. So go to the output, currency date. We'll come here, make sure the data type match up. Come here, select, go back here and look for, this is what we want, DB date. Click OK. So we'll double click on that again. We go to general, make sure we got partial selected. Next, go to the connection tab, make sure we've got our database selected there, which is AdventureWorks. You will click on this use a table of view, click on the drop down. We're going to select a table called dim date. So make sure you've got a table called dbo.dimdate selected. Click on columns. We're going to attempt to try and perform a simple equijoin between this input and the lookup. So to do that, we're going to move this currency date. Okay. Going to drag that on and drop it where it's got the alternate full date. All right, you can see the connection now is being made. The join has been initiated. Also, select the checkbox next to the date key. Click on that. Next, we go to the advanced tab. And on the advanced tab here, this page, we're going to review the caching options. So the caching options set to 25 megabyte for 32-bit and 25 also if you've got a 64-bit. So we're going to click OK. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to click OK. And that returns us to the data flow design view. Okay. The next thing we want to do is just check the property on the lookup date key. Right click, go properties. Just make sure that your local ID is set to your relevant country. I'm in UK, so it's got English United Kingdom. And also make sure the default code page is set to 1252. We have got a warning sign here in our design view complaining that the external columns, there's some mismatch here. The synchronization is out of whack, out of sync. because we made some changes. So what I need to do, I need to go back to the source. So I right click on the simple flat file source and go open, and click on the advanced and go to currency date, because we made some changes to the data type. So we need to reflect that here. So we need to come here and change that to, we changed it to database date DB time. So we need to click OK. And that, you notice the error message has disappeared because now the data type are in sync. So that is it for this lecture. Thank you so much for your time. Take care and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add and configure the OLE destination. The package we have at the moment is able to extract data from a flat file source, and is also able to transform that data into a format that is compatible with the destination. So what we're going to do in this lecture, we're going to look for a way to load the transformed data into the destination. And in order to achieve that, we'll need to add an OLDB destination to the data flow. So to add and configure a sample OLEDB destination, we need to click on the SSIS toolbox. So click on the toolbox, and within the toolbox, there is a expand this option here that says other destination. Okay. And what we need to do, we need to drag an OLEDB destination. We need to drag that onto the design surface of the data flow tab. Okay. I'm going to just drag one, just drag it up there. So I want it to be directly under this lookup date key. So I want it just directly underneath there. All right. So let's connect this to the lookup date key. So click on the lookup date key and just drag the blue arrow until it connects to it. And you're given this input output selection. In the input should already be populated with OLDB destination input. So what we need to do is select an option for the output. So click on the drop down, and we need to select lookup match output, and then click OK. Click on the OK button. We are going to rename this OLEDB connection. So just right click and click on the rename option. So I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it sample OLEDB destination. So I'm just going to put sample in front of it. So it'll be sample OLEDB destination. So that's going to be the new name. So let's double click on it just to view the editor page. So double click. So we need to just check a few settings here. Under the OLDB connection manager, make sure you've got the name of your database selected. In this option where it's got name of the table or the view, click on the drop down, and we're going to select a table called dbo.fact currency. So dbo, yep, that's the table we want. Make sure it says dbo.fact currency rate. Click this new button here to create a new table. Click new. So we're going to change the name of the table. Currently it's got sample, so we're going to change that. So we're going to call this table new fact currency rate. So this will be the name of our new table. Then click the OK button. Okay. So there's already a table called that. There shouldn't be. So let's cancel out of that and just check again. So I don't expect there to be a table called new. Oh yes, there is. We've already got a table called that. Okay, so I'm going to change this, make it the same name, but put number 2 in front of it. So I've called it new fact currency rate and I've added the number 2 at the end. So I'm going to click OK. So it's created that table. So you notice the view now is now showing the name of the new table that we've just created. You notice the 2 at the end of the rate. Next, click on the mappings options. So we can see a lot of mappings here. Let's just check that the mappings are correct. So we're going to verify that the average rate here is mapped correctly. And we've got the currency, this here. We're going to make sure that that is mapped. It seems to be mapped okay. The way we check that the mappings are correct from the input columns to the destination is that they must have the same matching names. So here it's got average rate, currency ID, currency ID, currency date, end of day rate. This matches that matches that. Because both column names match, which indicates that they have been correctly mapped. So we're happy, the mapping is correct. Click on the OK button. One more thing before we wrap up, right click on this sample OLDB destination. Let's check the properties, go properties, check that the local ID, this is set to wherever you are. I'm in the United Kingdom, make sure it's set to that. And then here, make sure that the default code page is set to 1252. If you've got all that checked in correctly, well done. So that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, we added an OLDB connection to enable us to load data into the destination source. Thank you for watching. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to test our package. So far, we created a new SQL Server Integration Services project. We configured the connection managers for the source data and for the destination data. We've added a data flow that takes the data from the flat file source, performs the lookup transformation on the data, and configures the data for the destination. So the package is complete. Let's go ahead and test it. To test the package, there's a menu here called debug. You can either just click on start or you go to debug, click debug and click on start debugging. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, it tells you here package execution complete with success. Click here to switch to the design mode or select stop debugging from the debug. So extract sample currency data, you've got a tick here, which means it has successfully done that. It's giving us rows here, 1096 rows. So this package has run and added this number of rows into the currency fact table in the AdventureWorks DW 2014 database. So we can stop the debugging now. We just click on this red stop button and the debugging should stop.